against this plan. We can say that with full certainty.
Yes.
One thing I will say is, the people in NYCHA and those of us in the committee understand that there is a need for flood protection. We are just simply against option 4. We are against the total destruction of the park, the demolish and bury plan. We see this as the city's plan to basically as an assault on our history and an assault on our continued presence in this community. And we believe that the city is doing this as in support of the real estate developers and in support of the high-income property owners. They're trying to draw more of that into the neighborhood. So basically, we're asking the city to consider us, the community residents. We're asking the city to consider the NYCHA residents, and we are the people that make the community what it is, and we're asking them to hear our voices and vote no on option 4. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is obviously somebody speaking on the steps of City Hall in opposition to what we're going to be talking about, which is this plan to dig up East River Park, and we'll tell you where that is in a minute, and raise it 9 feet in the air and pretty much take it out of the use of the community for time immemorial. New York City. But here's my guest. We're going to talk. There's a lot to say about it. But here's my guest, Harriet Hirshorn. She's involved with the East River Park group. You can tell people how to connect with it and everything. And she's a filmmaker and has been trying to oppose this plan to take away our park. So, Harriet, let's go back to the beginning, which was an October surprise 1 year ago.
So yeah, a year ago, the city suddenly announced that this new plan, the city had worked with Rebuild by Design and the community in a process that they called iterative design, where there were many meetings, and I'm sure the process wasn't perfect, but they did come up with a floodable park, of which there are several in New York City, actually. There's some partially floodable parks, and then there's some completely floodable parks. And this new plan seemed to totally fly in the face of environmental science and fly in the face of what we think causes climate change. It doesn't really seem to be even a Band-Aid in some ways. There are some people who are actually critical of this new plan's ability to protect the neighborhood from floods. Some people think it actually protects the neighborhood less from flooding, because the new plan, basically, as you said, involves destroying the entire 57 or 64, depending on how you look at it, acre park. And basically, by destroying everything in the park, killing 981 mature trees, the park is already mitigating against floods. It's already helping it absorb 250,000 gallons of water during Superstorm Sandy. Now, we got flooded anyway, but a lot of that water didn't really even come in through the park. It came up around the pinch point up at 14th Street and north of that, and rushed down Avenue C and flooded a lot of things on the way.
Well, I remember when Sandy happened. Yeah, I remember when Sandy happened because the power plant exploded, and then all the electricity went out, and the power plant is at 14th Street, right? That's where it flooded over there. So, okay, great. So now let's step back a little bit. That's a very interesting introduction, and let's start where is East River Park?
So East River Park is also called John Lindsay Park, and people way downtown call it Jackson Park, or used to about 60 years ago. It's an 80-year-old park, and it was built by Robert Moses, who was far more interested in shoring up our city and preparing it for cars, and a lot of cars.
The FDR Drive.
Yeah, the FDR Drive, et cetera. And he designed this park. Fast forward now, the park went through a very long period of neglect, actually. In the
It's
70s.
a landfill park, right?
Yes, it's a landfill
that was
park.
water before Moses in the 30s,
Yes.
the 1930s basically, came in.
There was landfill all the way. There are maps that you can superimpose where you go back in time. And all those NYCHA developments, I guess Lillian Wald and Jacob Rees houses, and also even Baruch houses, all of that is also landfill.
So the water used to come in a way closer.
It used to.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and so that was all landfill. And so and typical of Robert Moses, he used to trade off highways for parks because then there would be a place to go. It was sort of like somebody selling ink cartridges for your printer, you know, right? They wanted to sell gasoline, and this is their way of getting you to buy gasoline. Getting in your car, driving on a beautiful superhighway to a park, and then recreating, and then going back home, and this would be the new economy of America.
Right.
So but there came a time a year ago when, boom, there was a slap in the face, is the best way I can describe it.
Yes, and people in the neighborhood were really outraged because everybody has been wanting the flood protection for so long, and nothing happened. I mean, the old plan was decided upon. It didn't make it through the community board approval process, but it had way more community buy-in than this plan does, which just came out of nowhere and is being imposed on the community. And
they had meetings where people would come and be involved in actually developing this plan.
Yes, they did. And if you talk to Amy Chester at Rebuild by Design, or even other people,
what is Rebuild by Design?
That I don't really understand exactly who that was. You probably know more about that than I do, because I think it was basically a cooperative, but
young, modern, forward-thinking, and
yeah, it's I think they
architects
deal pretty much
and
with climate change. They're engineers and architects. They deal with climate change all over cities all over the world, actually, not just the U.S. And they had been, I guess, they were working with New York City to come up with appropriate and really community engaged and community co-designed flood protection. And so they came up with this floodable park.
Floodable means that you would allow the water to come in during a flood like Sandy.
Right.
And then when it flooded out, you would just do some repairs and get it back up again.
Exactly. And Sandy did flood the East River Park, but the park itself was not offline for very long, actually. And community members came out and cleaned up the ball fields. There were some trees that fell down, a lot of trees, and a lot of that was also due to the fact that there was no watering of those trees afterwards. So there was no way to sort of flush out the brackish water. Trees that were watered further north actually survived, and they're the same species. But I mean, I'm trying not to get too detailed, but
that's okay.
But I think that I think the main message of this new plan is, you know, we don't care about you. Right now, the politicians are, you know, all kind of patting each other on the back, including Carlina Rivera, and they're very much sort of boasting. And there's this whole sort of, to me, it's a bit of a propaganda war where they're now saying what a bold, beautiful design this is.
And what is this new design? How is it different?
So the new design is basically a levee. So
a levee? What? I took my Chevy to the levee, but the levee was dry. What's a levee?
The idea is to basically kill the entire park, rip everything out, kill every tree, and they haven't exactly explained how they're going to do the.
A levee is a man-made hill, basically.
Exactly.
They're just going to raise.
So it's they're basically going to kill everything in the park and then fill it full of concrete, and that will be a gigantic concrete wall, the whole width of the park and the whole length of the park. So that's a huge amount of concrete. So it will come up from the river, and so the whole park will just be this gigantic levee, and the levee will take about 5 years to build. And when the levee is done, then they will start building a kind of a sliver of park on top of the levee. So basically, you will go from the East River up 8 to 10 feet, and then huge, flat, wide levee that goes all the way to the FDR Drive.
They're building a giant wall.
Yes.
And so when you come right now, when you come to the waterfront, it's a beautiful like esplanade. You come and you look down. It's maybe on regular tide, it's like maybe 10 feet to the water below you. You're going to go up another 10 feet. And then when you go there, you're going to look down, and it's going to be like a breathtaking drop way down to the water. And it will be a waterfront park in name only, basically.
Right.
East River Park will be the name, but there's going to be no interaction, no true interaction with the water. you're not going to see it, be able to walk up to it and see water until you get really, really close, and then you have to look down to see it.
Exactly.
And they're saying they're going to make little embankments where you can walk down by the water, and be mugged or something.
All of the design elements.
I hate to be cynical.
Maybe if you do go to the CB3
Yes.
meeting on Thursday night, you'll be able to get more information. But they have not presented any sort of elaborate design differences or really design elements since July. It hasn't really changed. So basically there's very little detail in this plan. So we don't really understand it. It's
We're
very
going too
vague.
far by telling you what I think they're going to do. We really don't know.
Well, they're pushing it very quickly. I mean, they're in a huge hurry to get this passed and to vote on it and get it started.
Yeah.
They want to start in March.
Well, I should,
But
it's just
and if you ask them, tell us more about this design, they say, things evolve as we start. So they're very vague about what their design is.
yeah, right. Well, 'cause big construction projects don't always work, and I can talk about 10 or 15 billion dollar projects that were built and then didn't work, and they just pack up and go away. That's it.
Yeah, this is
It's
1.45
yeah,
billion.
that's nothing. It could be 15, 20 billion. It wouldn't be the first MAGA project that everybody thought was great that didn't work out, and the construction companies, they get paid anyway, and they just walk away and leave it to some other generation to deal with. It's just you win a few. Sometimes the bear eats you. Sometimes you eat the bear. That's a lot of engineering is like that. It really is.
Well, East River Park Action, and you can visit the website. It's eastriverparkaction.org. Pat Arno has done an incredible job on that website, and there's a lot in there just about what is this plan like, and who's behind it, and who will benefit from it. Really,
Do we know?
since
Can you
it's
tell
not
us?
going to the community.
We
No,
all
I
like to
mean,
know.
It's kind of like April Merlin just said in that video clip.
Yeah.
Pretty much everyone, including everybody in the NYCHA buildings, suspects that this is related to real estate development because
Yeah.
the real estate development in our neighborhood is so just off the charts. I mean, I don't know.
Oh,
where
I
you
asked
live,
Gail
but-
Brewer that, and I asked her, "Is this about gentrification?" And she said, "Gentrification happens all the time anyway." Saying something, he said the real reason people have problems is because they won't be able to use their parks for a few years, and so we came up with a new plan that only partially closes the park. Why aren't you happy with that new plan?
Because phased construction is still phased destruction. It still involves a radical amount of destruction, and destruction of nature in the name of climate change just really feels like an oxymoron. I think the other thing is that it's really huge. I mean, to destroy 60 acres of parkland is huge. It's going on all over the city. It's not just East River Park.
Yeah.
They're doing it at Fort Greene Park, and the city makes it so that the only way that people can do anything is to have a lawsuit. There's no other way to fight this. The politicians don't listen to us at all. They listen to each other somewhat, but they don't listen to constituents at all. Watching them vote, sort of watching them batch vote.
Right. I'm on the community board. I should tell people that. I should maybe have said it at the beginning. I'm a member of the community board. I'm a member of the Parks Committee. So I have voted on this, and I'm one of 3 people on the board of 50 people who voted against this project.
Yeah, that's crazy.
3, and the other 2, and the 3 of us are like radical, like the way most radical people on the board. I mean, we're always making stink about things and always voting 2 to 0, 2 to 50, 1 to 50, 3 to 50.
How did that happen?
It's always been that way.
Yeah. As radical, with such a radical past, and as vocal, and I mean,
Oh, I was there. It's
ACT UP
another
was all
issue.
Over the East
Yeah.
Village. I mean, the
They
90s
changed the it's called what do they call that when they changed the voting district lines?
rezoning.
No, not rezoning. When they change voting and make them gerrymandering. They gerrymandered. What happened was, for a long time, we had a strong left-wing progressive woman who was the city council person who personally blocked all these projects, and she had been there for 20 years.
Who was that?
why can't I think of her name? It'll come to me in a second. She was the councilwoman back in the 80s at the time of the Tompkins Square Park riot. And her name will come to me in a second. I should know it. And what they did was in 1990, nobody cared because in 1980 the area was sort of bombed out and the money was divesting from there and nobody cared. And it sat there, you know, I loved it. It was my neighborhood then too, but it was a bombed out neighborhood that nobody cared about. And then they had plans afoot to gentrify the area and to bring in a lot more investment. And at that point, they gerrymandered. The district used to include the areas, you know, my neighborhood around Tompkins Square Park voted for Bernie Sanders. I mean, like, we're one of the most liberal, progressive neighborhoods in the whole city. More progressive, let's say the Upper West Side likes to say they're also progressive, but they're all a bunch of rich people. We're actually poor people or lower middle class people who are progressive. And we were allied. It was a rough alliance with the housing project people and the people in the poorest areas of the city. So we voted for a left-wing progressive woman for many years whose husband had died in the Spanish Civil War and things like that, you know, who embodied, you know, the Vito Marcantonio and the labor union type of thing, who voted, can you imagine a community board, a city council member voting in favor of the homeless' right to sleep in Tompkins Square Park against the police over and over again? So what they did was they said, well, we have to make this a more diverse, they wanted to make, of the most diverse district in the city, they wanted to make it more diverse. So they split off Chinatown and gave that to Asian Americans for Equality. And they tacked on what used to be Chinatown and was a poor neighborhood that used to vote for people like Miriam Friedlander. And they added on Gramercy Park. Mm-hmm. So now we have Gramercy Park connected with us. And Gramercy Park is an area that reminds me of Yonkers, New York. Mm-hmm. No low-income housing allowed here. Mm-hmm. All the low-income housing had to be south of 14th.
Well, when we first heard about this whole plan, it really felt like an attack on the people who use the park, which is basically like a lot of low-income people. So
well, you know, the mayor
pretty easy to raise consciousness about this situation, because you walk into the park and just walk up to someone and say, do you know what's going to happen? And
I still like Republican mayors because Republican mayors are like, you know, like Giuliani. I mean, he's a jerk in so many ways, but one thing that was cool about him was, you know, they don't really care what happens in a poor neighborhood. That's not where their interest is. But the Democrats, they're always the ones chopping up and giving away to this group or that group, you know, and they're the ones who hate the squatters. And so the Democrats hate squatters, the Republicans love squatters, you know. And I'm sure I just gave, oh my God, the Democrats will say, oh, we knew it all along, right? But it was Giuliani who gave the gardens to the gardeners, who gave the squats to the squatters.
And now they're having a problem too.
Well, possibly, right. But you see what I mean? The idea of people,
draconian licenses
yeah, right.
supposed to sign.
Now, what's interesting? So, okay, great. So this is where it gets controversial, right? Obviously, because what you're doing is trying to protect your park and save your park is putting you up against the powers that be in a democratic city that is paying the bills for social peace by selling off the property to the highest bidders and to the Trump organization, as much as they say they're not, and things like that, right? So, all right, and the Republicans are funny because they were making their money some other way, you know. They were like cleaning up they were trying to get rid of the teachers union or something like that. But so there's different factions in New York, and now you're dealing with a faction around the mayor, de Blasio, that is really big on selling $40 million apartments to Ukrainian gangsters whose names we don't even know, who work with Trump, even as he marches against Trump, right? That's what they're doing. You just go down 57th Street here and you'll see it, right? Nobody even knows who lives in those buildings. Or even the one here on 59th, right on Columbus Circle, you know, upstairs or there. Nobody even knows who those people are who live in that building, who can pay $20, $30, $40, $50 million an apartment. They're not Americans. They're laundering money from foreign countries, which is legal in New York. And so, you know, and the same people whose names pop up in Giuliani and Trump and what's going on in Ukraine and things like that, the same people. All right. So the oligarchs, right? They're the ones who their money is flowing in China too. Big money place. Corrupt Chinese people who are working for the Communist Party, who are corrupt in the Chinese Communist Party. They're pouring money into New York. So that I'm sorry to tell you these things, but that's the world we live in. All right. So what about NYCHA? They're saying, oh, you are just like liberal white people with your, stupid environmentalism. You don't really care about these Latino people of color living in these projects on the river who will be flooded out.
Well, that's why April and Curtis and Yvette Mercedes, who April doesn't live in a NYCHA campus, but the other two, Curtis White and Yvette Mercedes, do. And they were very upset when they found out about the plan to destroy the park, and they were really upset when they found out that tenant leaders from other NYCHA campuses were saying that they were in favor of this plan before anybody had heard of it. So they got very upset, and they started a petition. Well, first Yvette and April went door to door and just knocked on people's doors and just said, "Are you aware of what's happening?" And nobody knew. They had, in 2 months, they talked to something like 2,000 people, and out of the 2,000 people, they may have met 2 or 3 who had actually heard that the park was going to be destroyed. So
when they talk about NYCHA supporting this project, they're talking about
4 tenant leaders.
Right,
4
and most people don't know anything about it.
Most people knew nothing about it until April, Curtis, and so they started a petition, which is just called NYCHA Speaks. And before the city council vote, we turned in 8,500 signatures from different parts of the community, and different groups had gathered those signatures. And so, of the NYCHA signatures, they literally just stood on NYCHA campuses and waited for people to come out of the building and ask them if they knew about the park and what their opinion was, and if they were willing to sign a petition. And there was almost nobody who didn't want to sign that petition. They were just, if they had put more time into it, they would have gotten more than the 2,500 signatures that they did get. But most of the people they talked to had not even heard of this plan.
Right.
They had no idea. I mean,
yeah.
these are
And
people
it wasn't
who are
there,
going to walk
and
out to go to the park, and they're going to see a wall.
Right.
They're going to see, a big.
Right. The view. They're not going to be a view of the river anymore.
There's going to be construction going on behind it, and this is how they're going to find out.
Right. Right. And we just have a few minutes. Isn't it true that there was already flood work done to protect NYCHA buildings under other parts of the government?
So that's another really interesting Google search to do. If you type FEMA Resiliency and Recovery, Sandy. Yeah. Just resiliency and recovery.
I've seen that.
You will see all of the PDFs of all the different kinds of flood protection that each one of the NYCHA campuses is going to get. And they're all very different. If you go to Baruch right now, you would see they've dug it all up, and there are walls all around it.
So there's projects already to protect the buildings and the campuses of the NYCHA houses. So when they say you're just a bunch of liberal environmentalists who don't believe who don't want to protect these poor people's homes because you want to keep your precious little park the way it was, that's not actually accurate.
That's not true at all. And also, it's a little bit racist to assume that black and brown people can't be environmentalists, and that low-income people can't be environmentalists. And it's a I don't know where that stereotype comes from, and I don't know how.
Oh, they're playing on it. Trump got to be president playing on stereotypes like that.
Yeah, but it's absolutely false, and it also neglects the fact that a lot of environmental justice movements were started by people of color, including in this country. So it's really it's basically.
3 minutes, 4 minutes ago. What can people do? What's the next step? There's going to be a lawsuit?
Yes, we're currently engaged in an alienation lawsuit because, strangely,
what's alienation?
Alienation is a technical term. It's a legal term. Basically, if you have parkland and you're going to take it out of parkland use and it cannot be used as a park, whether temporary or forever, you're required to seek alienation. In other words, you're required to seek state's oversight. And the city was convinced that they did not need to seek alienation for this project, even though they're turning a park into a storm surge wall. Yet they felt that they needed to seek alienation for the last project, where they were going to use the park as a floodable park. So I'm not really the old project is called the Bridging Berm Project, and it basically it was kind of curvy and
Right, like what
and
they're doing in
very
Brooklyn.
Slightly
Yeah.
It would be like this slope. It would be like a gentle slope up to the FDR Drive, and then so the water would come up to the FDR Drive, and then go back out.
Right.
So it sort of be directed that.
So where can people, last 2 minutes, where can people go for more information?
EastRiverParkAction.org.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also East River Alliance. But I think Pat Arno really updates EastRiverParkAction.org more often. Also, the focus is really on taking action. So
EastRiverAction.org. And what's the next?
EastRiverParkAction.org.
East River Park Action. EastRiverParkAction.org. All right?
Yes.
EastRiverParkAction.org. Great. All right. So last minute and a half. What's our takeaway on this? We're talking about the death of democracy here, or what's going on?
I think it's the $1.45 billion question.
That's how much the project's going to cost.
Yes, I think we need to follow the money. We need to find out who's benefiting the most from this, because it's certainly not the people or the community.
Mm-hmm. And when does construction start? When they do begin this?
March.
In March. And the lawsuit hasn't been filed yet?
The lawsuit is about to be filed. Yes.
It's about to be filed, right?
Yes.
And who's your lawyer?
Arthur Schwartz.
Right, I know well. I know Arthur very well. He has a show at WBAI and helped WBAI out a lot. He's an amazing lawyer, right, for the community. And he drives the city crazy. He's good at that. All right, good. So,
but like Fort Greene Park, we will probably have to resort to environmental lawsuits as well.
mm-hmm. What are those?
It's, the planned destruction of this park, if this were to happen, because of a flood, we would consider it a natural disaster, and if someone else did it to us, we'd consider it an act of war. So you sort of think to yourself, well, there must be an environmental law that is being violated by this amount of destruction, whether it's the contamination that we're going to breathe when they dig up the ground,
yeah.
whether it's...
We don't know where they're going to bring in all that
once all
landfill.
the trees are gone,
Yeah.
are we going to be exposed to a lot more pollution?
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Okay.